And today is a special day. We are creating, Eric, Batchler, and I, we've spoken about this, and everybody's heard our first episode by now, our pilot, the One series, the Warriors of Now. And this is under the Imagine Fitting In umbrella. And Eric was a passionate guest who is in the same line of work, I would say, on a physiological level in athletics. And he's a mental performance coach. Kim Nugent is a author, dynamo, motivational educator, and longtime innovator of rehabilitation. And we're going to invite Kim. And thank you so much, Kim, for coming on for the first episode. I'm going to have Kim just give herself a brief introduction. And Kim, tell us a little bit more just briefly about where you are and where you come from and what's your specialty.
Sure. So started out in the service industry and hospitality and worked my way up. I wasn't just a teenager working in a fast food place. It's something I really wanted to do, and became a general manager and then a divisional manager. But at the same time, when I went to college, Dr. Raymond Goodman was a professor that I had in my first semester, and he made teaching look so easy. I found out later it wasn't, but I went back to school and earned my doctorate so that I could teach. And 20 years in, I became a faculty member at a university, and it was my dream come true, honestly. That's what I thought at the time. That was my vision. But you never know how limiting your vision can be until something else occurs. And I ended up ultimately becoming a university president several times, which was a true honor. And then went and opened my own business and have become a writer. And I'm also an executive coach. I have been for quite some time. And now my passion is all about prison reform through mentorship and programming that we really can make a difference in the United States if we choose to.
Nice. And I think, Eric, you would agree that when you hit on mentoring, your thoughts?
Well, first I want to comment on the prison reform, because not only is that critical to the people that are going through the system, but it's actually critical to society. And I love that you're getting involved in that, because we like to isolate criminals as if they aren't part of our society, but they are. They're here every day working alongside you. They're part of your community. And to think that you would silo them and separate them without growth opportunities, I mean, you're no longer treating them as human and productive members of society. So I really commend you on taking on that challenge, because there are some deep set biases that prevent us from looking at somebody who's made a mistake as being human. And, from a mental performance perspective, it's all about getting back on that horse, right? And yet, if you do something that breaks the law, even if that law changes later, we never look at you the same again. And I look at that, and really, that's an amazing thing to get involved in. And, my little brother went overseas and did a study on Scandinavia looking at their prison systems and the drastic difference between how they handle rehabilitation and how we handle not rehabilitating. So just wanted to say that. I wanted to say that earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt you. And that truly, from a mental performance perspective, it's huge, because it's all about getting back up and going out and improving yourself. But from a society standpoint, it's even bigger. So thank you for that. That's huge.
You're welcome. I think you and I have a lot in common when it comes to a couple of things. One is, I'm sure you've discovered this a long time ago with your work with athletes, but for me, it starts and ends with mindset.
Absolutely.
And the other thing I think is, I truly believe in second chances, that one event should not define you for the rest of your life. And it's exactly what you said, getting back up on the horse and trying it again. Because what we see a lot, I think, in the world is we see these really amazing, successful people, and we think they were an overnight success. They weren't. They worked it every single day, and they had a lot of failure, but they got up every day and said, you know what can I learn from this, and just move forward. And that's how they became who they are today.
Oh yeah. We love to rewrite history to only talk about the part where they rose. It's that Hollywood moment. Life's not Hollywood. It's so much grittier. It's so much darker. There's so much more failure, and we rely so much more on each other than what they ever tell us in the movies. you don't just get back on the horse by yourself. There's someone there to pick you up, dust you off, and help you get back in the saddle. And that's where we fall down, I think, so often. I was just having a conversation with somebody about how we shame people for asking for help.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart when someone reaches out and the first response is to be shunned. And
Right.
imagine carrying that scarlet letter with you everywhere, which is what prisoners end up doing. So
Absolutely. And what I really go ahead. Here.
I
Go ahead.
take that back to, my podcast of Imagine Fitting In and this pilot, Kim, please keep your thought about when she mentioned those mindsets. So this topic I wanted to talk, we refer to as that expressive mindset and that visionary potential, in that as individuals, in again, I'm a big supporter of the arts as well as physiology and movement and wellness, is that if we're unable to voice out to ourselves, and hopefully comfortable enough out loud to those people that, as you mentioned, Eric, to help dust you off or get you back up and support that vision that you have. So I think it's critical, both from a standpoint of creating this structure and this march of people, of not to start to like see what goes on other places, and that we the people should be enough in numbers to create energy and flow, which I hope that this podcast, and Kim, you're doing it on the front lines of a deep place where people are not even thinking about that, and we're thinking on the front lines going, let's try to make sure some of these athletes that don't make it are not going to be end up where you're pulling them out from. So your thoughts, Kim?
Well, I think that, one thing, Eric, you said was about the impact that people don't think about in terms of community. But the truth is, when I take a look, if I take a step back and I take a look at the number of people who are incarcerated today, and then that's one issue. Then if I take a look at the number of people on every business out there that is not fully staffed, and what if we could bring those two things together, where employers would consider being a second chance employer, number one, and then we could start to fill the gap? Because for example, you go into any restaurant, almost any business today, and they're still hiring. They haven't really recovered from COVID, which is one thing. And we have people who really want a second chance and who have really changed if they've taken advantage of programming. That's one thing. The second thing, I think, and this happens in teams when you're working with athletes, and it does take a village, but I will say that, my approach is very structured. And when I work with men in these maximum security prisons, it is a 6 to 9 month program, but it's through mentorship. It's through lived experience, and they have small groups of 4, and they start to open up and have conversations they've never had in their life, much less with a man, about things they're thinking about and the things that they would love to see for themselves and their families. And so to have a space that's safe, psychologically safe, to be able to share those things, I think is really important, or to ask for help. And a lot of times they've been disappointed many times, whether it's family or friends or somebody else. People talk a good game, but they don't really deliver sometimes. And so again, they're used to that. So when somebody comes in and says, there's another way, there's opportunity there. And I wish I had actually videotaped the last prison I was doing work on visioning and mindset. And what they said out loud would just blow your minds about what they see as possible, and that they can be the change for the future.
Wow. That level of optimism from that point of view and that perspective, and where they've been and humbled. And, I go back to that, thing that Kim got excited about when I was mentioning the concept of that, my physiologically based program, balance awareness, cognitive engagement. She spoke about these people that had, never been able to express themselves in an open kind of forum, especially males. And when you know as well as anyone, Eric, that physicality of the sports competition, it is everything. And I can go anywhere and present. And there is not a woman, man, or child who does not want to get into a contest, who does not want to show what they got. on a physical
Yep.
level, like, oh, I can do that, right? And there's such a level of connection, of just raw, like it doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter how much money you make, it doesn't, nothing matters. That humanity of just that human spirit of endeavor and competition, which we know in America, you got to have a thick skin, because you just spoke about the other countries, about how they care for society. And, this is right? This is the most competitive capitalistic place, freedom to, right? Manifest destiny, but boy, hold on. And, I think we become this source of such power that we almost lose sight of the humanity around what we have. And I think that all of our work is speaking from that, to say there's more than just us that is talking about this, and know that in terms of, from Kim saying, these employers that need these bodies, that I think she mentioned a high percentage of the people, Eric, that come out of prison, they're going to be 97% are going to be coming out and living back in your community. Do you want to know that you've invested to try to have them come out and more formal experience? And Eric, shed some light on how your experience with young athletes and that competitiveness and that kind of environment opens up the gates to communication, and how you started your
Hmm.
career and where you shine.
Well, one of the things I thought about it, and this is going to sound like I'm minimizing the issues with the prison system at first, but stay with me here on this one. Okay. So one of the issues I'm running into in sports is when you get to be about 13 years old, you quit. And you quit because you've been ostracized. You quit because it's become more about the winning than it is about the developing of the athletes. And what's happening as you get into high school sports, teams are having trouble just fielding rosters. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some big schools that are out there, and let's say they have a baseball team, they're trying to roster 22 kids, right? And they're going to have 75 kids try out. But there are also schools that need 22 kids for their varsity team, and they need 22 kids for their JV team, and they're lucky if 14 total kids show up. And so what's happened at those younger ages is we've shut down the communication lines. We've taken a position of authority over those kids, and we've said, I am the coach. You can't talk to me about your playtime. You can't talk to me about your training. You can't talk to me about your role on our team. And then they also minimize the value of the player. So let's say you have a late bloomer, undersized individual who really, really, really wants to be good, and they're working really hard, but their DNA hasn't produced the physicality yet to succeed. Well, now they're going to be pushed to the bottom of the roster. They're not going to be treated as an equal member of the team. They're not going to get the reps in games. It's not going to be fun. They're going to become demoralized, and they're going to walk away, and they're no longer going to be contributing when it comes to high school. And all of a sudden, that 12-man travel team that pushed them away, or rec team that pushed them away, is feeding to a system that no longer has enough bodies to fill it. And
Mhm.
so when I look at the way we treat things in society, everything kind of comes back to that mindset. We've gotten to a place where we're no longer encouraging growth. We're only seeking the immediate gratification and the comfort of what we believe in that moment is right. And whether you're talking about not welcoming a convict who's rehabilitated into the workplace, into the community, whether you're talking about not giving room for a late bloomer to grow, whether you're talking about not allowing the artistic vision of somebody who sees the world slightly different than you do to be on display, too often we get into these little boxes of what we consider to be the appropriate performance level, the appropriate mindset, the appropriate vision. And we lose so much value through exclusion. And so what I've tried to do with the athletes that I'm working with, and with the non-athletes that I work with, is give them means to lift themselves up and make themselves valuable to themselves. Because first you've got to believe in your value, and then you can project that value to other people. And the hope is you'll find the right people around you to latch onto that and help continue to raise you through that. And I think, when I hear about whether we're talking about prisoners, whether we're talking about students, whether we're talking about student athletes, right now, I love our country. but we're doing a really, really good job of limiting our own resources, our own human resources.
Um, Kim, I have to mention about community. You and myself and Eric, we have these structured templates, these solutions that come in, and you project and target the audience that we're trying to boost up and to inspire and to engage with, to help them. And then obviously the people there around them there, or the organized effort that brought you in. And obviously, Kim, you do amazing work complementing those efforts internally. We try to bring another additional support. And then Eric, something that Kim mentioned to our previous podcast, that talking about how she would engage the community and bring business owners and community leaders and schools and citizens to come together and make the issue, make them aware of what's going inside those walls, right? Mm-hmm. And we're the same, Kim. Here, Eric and I are making an attempt to bring light on what's happening on inside those walls, but outside the shining lights of the big game, or the shining lights of like, oh, you're home and safe and secure because those bad people are locked up. We need to open our eyes to so much more. So, Kim, what's your thoughts? And it's all about community, we know.
It is, absolutely. One thing, Eric mentioned it briefly in the beginning of this, is just really about, one of the things that I think that people have a lot of misconceptions about people who are incarcerated. Did they do the crime? Yes. Should they serve time? Absolutely. Not saying anything different around that. However, I will say that programming is going to be the biggest differentiator to be able to help them see themselves in a new and different way. But when they're released, I think what people sometimes forget, and this is the honest to goodness truth, is one bad decision that any of us make, wrong place, wrong people, wrong time, we could all go to prison. I know we think that's not possible, but if you had a car accident and a variety of other things were happening, and maybe it's a manslaughter charge or something like that, all of a sudden your life got turned upside down. So now let's fast forward. You served your time, you're getting out. In prisons across the United States, you're probably going to get, depends on the state, $25, $50, or $100. So just tell me what you're going to do with that little money to get a place to stay, to have a ride. You don't have a cell phone. You don't have an email address. You don't. And so it's got to be a community approach where we're sitting around the table together to talk about what are the things we can do to help support people. So, because it's not just them, it's their family, their children, their friends. And it's a ripple effect in the community that we're not thinking about those things. But when you were talking, Eric, about students, and then Greg, you said competition, we all like competition. One of the things I was thinking for young people in particular, particularly if you don't have enough students to make those rosters, is wouldn't it be great if, like, maybe even in the 6th grade or 5th grade, we started doing mindset training with people, so they can start to think about themselves and notice what they're thinking. And then the other thing I was thinking is, one of the things that I think that probably is a joy killer for all of us, but particularly with teenagers, is comparison. And with social media and everything else, they're getting on their phones and they're comparing their lives to what they think is true. Maybe yes, maybe no. But, that's the thing that will keep you stuck more than anything else.
Yes. Seeing a world that looks unapproachable, unimaginable, getting stardust in your eyes and getting confused and being distracted from the real essence of who you are in the first place, thinking that you're going to hop, skip, jump somewhere that you're seeing in this floating universe of shares and all this kind of stuff. And we know that technology is a wonderful thing, how it's bringing us alive here and making our message count. But also it's used in ways that entertain us, distract us, create just an environment of avoidance, and all of a sudden no time left. So, there's something that she mentioned, Eric, was that that communication and competition. And we talked about this, Kim, that you said that you'd meet with these communities and they'd have all these best intentions, but then they would come back to the next meeting and they're like, what were we talking about? And I think that the base program, Eric, both from a level of in schools and get to support gameplay, to support templates of all manner of instruction and content and subject matter, if it's from knowing how to dress properly or to know how to twist and turn and avoid getting hit for a fast pitch, to this kind of engagement on a physiological level, which I know in my experience, 30 years with working with people, that people, when I get them physically moving and engaged and give them a challenge, a physical challenge related to a concept skill, they're like, I go, how difficult was that on the skill level and the strength level? Like strength level, it was hard at all, but a skill level, it was super difficult. And I'm going to relate that to skill retention of ideas, as Kim mentioned. You want to create a momentum and create that energy of ideas and momentum. And I think that the average person, sometimes they just don't remember and retain everything that went on. And I think that if there's more of a connection, like, oh, I remember when we were doing this with the base program, and that person from the other part of town said something, and while they were showing me this move, I couldn't figure out. And it's like this solidified like connection of like we act out, right? When you act out, right, something, a kindness, right, to another person, that person and that face that you give to that person, it resonates. But if you say something snide and you're like waiting to try to affect somebody on a negative fashion, that's never to be thought about again. That's just like a temporary. So I'm going to extremes here, the polarity, but I think it's key. And this is why, Kim, that when I first met Eric with our sessions, we found synergy through physicality and communication and connection and socialization and critical thinking, all the 3 C's. And when you spoke about your efforts to not only empower these people that are truly leaders within the system, and you're actually pulling these people that are rehabilitated, they want to come out, they want to be the teachers and leaders to bring people out behind them. And so I think that along with lines of the athletics and Eric, I'm passionately looking to try to create excitement to the education system, to realize the template that I have is powerful, could be used to complement whatever right now on the brim is effective working, teaching, physical or mental. And you guys both know that from a rehabilitation standpoint, from a performance standpoint in sports. And I'm coming from a functionality. And the neuroscience shows that if we can engage each other in playful competition, we're going to retain and be inspired and percolate, right? I always leave you guys, okay, let's percolate on what we just talked about. We got so excited. And this is months later, Eric, that Kim spent with me and you spent with me. And I am still percolating. And I see a bounty of opportunity. And I would like to have your thoughts, both of you guys, your thoughts on, I don't know,
let me jump in, Greg.
A potential vision. Yeah, vision.
So one of the things that I think that, because everything you're saying, obviously, I love it, and it just gets me all excited. But when we talk about the friendly competition, I think one of the things we sometimes forget to talk about is the perception of the person competing. And so one of the things we need to work on not only is having competition to raise people up, but, and I hate to always take it back to sports, but we're going to do that here. Let's say you got a softball batting order, right? Your superstar is batting third, and they strike out. Your developing players batting ninth, and they strike out. Your perception of those 2 strikeouts is going to be different. You're going to pat the number 3 hitter on the back and be like, hey, I know you've got him next time. But when that person at the bottom of the batting order strikes out, it's going to be, oh, of course they did. Of course they did. And so when we talk about prisoners, someone gets out, gets a job, and they're late. Are we going to perceive them the same as the guy with the master's degree? Are we going to perceive them the same as the guy with the bachelor's degree? Or are we going to be like, well, of course the prisoner was late. They're probably also the one that stole the snacks out of the break room. And so when we talk about competition and we talk about doing things at the level that the person can compete and at the level that they're developing, we also have to talk about how we maintain that mental strength, not only for the player or the contributor, but for the onlooker, for the person that is judging the competition and saying, okay, just because they're a developing player and they're batting ninth doesn't mean that their strikeout is more harmful than the person who batted third. They might be the better athlete. The strikeout's the strikeout, and we need to be able to move on from that mistake, that failure with everybody and lift them to take that next step, that next growth journey. Because I think that's where with competition, sometimes we fall short. We're quick to celebrate the champions and we're quick to assume the worst of the ones that are at the bottom and growing and developing their physicals, their mentals, their society's traits.
I
Kim,
totally
thoughts?
agree with everything you said, Eric. I mean, I saw that at the university with faculty members or staff members, and it has to be an equal playing field, regardless of what environment we're talking about. But we all have biases. Some of them we know about. Some of those are totally undistinguished. And I think that I was talking to a potential client yesterday, dealing with a conflict that they have on a team, and he has a conflict with a team member. And so I reminded him, we had done some work on mindset, and I said, would you be open to the possibility of that next interaction you have with this person to come from a learner perspective rather than a judger perspective? And he took a minute and he said, I would consider that. And I said, because if you're going to go in having already decided who this guy is and how it's going to go exactly how you said, and it's not going to go well. And is that what you're committed to? And he goes, no, I want collaboration. I said, well, the first thing we got to do is we've got to get into his world and find out about him and build some trust before you can ever get to collaboration. And I think the other thing, sometimes in the world that we live in, and again, I don't care what environment it is, we have automatic assumptions about people. We like them, we don't like them, or something else. We don't know. We just haven't had a conversation with them. So I always say, get curious. I bet we have something in common. We don't even know we have something in common with that person. They could be your next best friend and you don't know.
Absolutely.
At one, the wars of now, we kind of, we believe everybody possesses like an untapped potential, regardless of age or circumstance. And, Kim, what's your thoughts on how do we help young people and adults who may feel they have fallen behind, but recognize that their contributions are, may still lie ahead?
Well, I believe everyone has a gift, first of all. And I think that we need to bring back kind of stories of people's inspiration, but not show the end game, show the mistakes along the way to say, you know what, here. And I think we forget that. I think also as we get to become adults, we forget about the creativity that we had as kids and the imagination and things. We thought we could do anything, right? And then school and family and friends sort of take that away, and we start listening to that instead of really listening to something we would absolutely love to have. I was in a class a couple of weeks ago. This woman is 92 and she's writing her first book. And I'm so excited for her. If you could see her on video, her eyes were just glistening. She was so excited. It's never too late. And I think sometimes we tell ourselves stories, I'm too old to, whatever it is. And it's just not true. If it's something that lights you up, go for it.
It's, it's something, what comes to mind to me is, I'm a huge, and I'm going to do my little bite here. I'm a huge music fan, right? If you're a fan of sports and athletes and musicians, right? And after now, I've just finally released my first album on Imagine the Artist. And what you were speaking of about the story, the bio, the background. And, I would read these bios of these artists that I truly respected, didn't know 100% about, only these surface details over the years and had judgment about it. And then you read their biography and you're like, whoa, you have usually 9 times out of 10, I'm sure you agree, Eric, that your perspective it completely sits on its head. You're like, that's unbelievable. I never realized the challenges and the hardship. And then all of a sudden, some people, right, however you want to say notoriety or fame gets to somebody's head and how they respond and keep on a facade or like your mask, right? Your mask. It's very humbling. And I think that everybody's story, and that's why I think that obviously narratives and in the world of AI, it comes about who's the storyteller, right? What original story do you have to share to highlight your work? Because I think that what's the most powerful thing going forward here is our conscious minds and our developing souls and how we articulate and put that into words and express that to the common man, our fellow man, in terms of originality, because these times are percolating. We know what's already happened. AI is going to regenerate what's happened. What are we doing now? And so this is a big point perspective when I go back when you tell 92-year-old telling her story. She probably feels so alive and engaged that she's going to be able to contribute something. The fact that people are going to read about what her journey is, that's powerful.
I
That's
totally
amazing.
agree.
Well, I'm gonna jump in here with a shameless plug. Okay, so
Absolutely.
I started my writing journey, well, many years ago, writing um, support documents or seminars and things like that. But a couple years ago, I really started getting serious about it. And my capacity series is nonfiction, self-help, mental performance books. But what I didn't tell you, Greg, and I will tell everybody today, is that last week I published my first work of fiction. And I took a story
Nice.
from my first book and I elaborated on it. I drew it out into a full universe. And it's the story of Tito. He was a basketball player with foul shot problems. He grew up playing in rec centers. He grew up playing on the playground. No blood, no foul. Certainly no foul shots. And I wanted to tell his story in a deeper way than I did in the nonfiction book, where I was using it as a tool to explain how to do things, how to anchor, and how to set up a strategy for overcoming an obstacle. So I wrote this fiction book, and all the characters in it are compilations. They are bits and pieces of different kids I've worked with, different people I've worked with. I stick myself in a couple of them in places just to make the story more enjoyable. But one of the keys for me was not every part of the story ends with success. We love to have happy endings, but there are different characters with different results, even if they're doing the right things. And there are different people who never assert themselves, so they never get that opportunity to get what they were not necessarily owed, but what they had earned through hard work. If they stayed so quiet about it and they weren't assertive about it, that nobody ever saw the results of it. And when I hear stories about a 92-year-old writing their first book, that's somebody who, for the last 70 years, has been sitting on a story and it hadn't become assertive enough to tell it. And they needed someone to lift them up to do so. And for me, that happened when I took my first manuscript to a buddy and said, "Hey, will you look at this?" And then I quickly ducked down because I felt shame because I was afraid it would be bad. And I had to come to terms with two big things before I was willing to publish. And one is, the book failing doesn't mean I'm a failure. If only one person buys it, and it's my mom, I still put that
Yeah.
piece of artwork out there in the world. And that's what it is. It's a piece of
Yes.
me, it's a piece of art. I still put it out there, and that in and of itself is success. And so when we talk about competition, the instinct is to say, well, if I'm not a bestseller, I'm a failure. And that's not it. My success came from the fact that I went ahead and published it, and I put it out there, and I took that chance. And the second part of that is judging how successful the book is from its reach. If one kid gets it and reads about Tito and starts to understand a little bit more about how they can help themselves outside of the team framework to be a better part of the team, then it's been a success. It doesn't have to reach everybody. Me putting it out there was a huge landmark for me. If one kid is helped by it, that's a huge landmark for the story itself. And I think judging competition and judging success in a healthy way, allowed me to get over my own nerves, my own concerns about what it would mean to me if I took the chance and let someone else see what I had created over the last few years. So it was a great journey for me and a great experience for me. So I'm really excited to hear that somebody else is also taking that journey.
Listen, I mean, I have to congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
What the one comment I will make is that, oh my gosh, the number of people and loved ones and around me that have seen me with so many grand adventures and thoughts and ideas at any given time, was never hesitant to say what if, and
Right.
stumble right and fall on my face. But
Yeah.
now, like, I'm feeling like I'm this peak, and that I can justifiably, me knowing, like, starting this podcast, I've said this almost every podcast. If I can save one young man, one young person, just one, it's going to be all worth it. This is a total passion project. And when I know, like when I'm writing my songs now and I'm putting them out, that's my story. And I try to reflect my story in what's going on with all humans and all these questions that we constantly ask ourselves, and that we're on this ride together. As long as I know, like you mentioned, Eric, that I am content that I did what no would have, should have, or could have. I have taken the feat of just, people ask, like, how is it being an artist? Where do you come up with this stuff? I can't explain it. If I could explain it, then I wouldn't be an artist, because I don't know where it comes from. And I was mentioning to Kim, Eric, that I literally I wrote just 2 days ago a World Cup song, which I'm going to be putting out there. I have literally written like 65 new songs and produced them in the last 3 months. I'm on this prolific thing that's coming out, and everybody tells me, like, don't stop. I'm like I'm a little obsessed, but as an artist, I call them, and I have a song about this, modern day shamans, and I'm trying to relate to everybody. You don't have to call yourself to be an artist to express yourself, to identify what's real with you and in you, and to acknowledge it to yourself, because that's the only person that truly it's vital to. And then everything else is just fluff and the rest. And I have to compliment Kim, both acknowledge 10 books, Eric. We have our work cut out for us in terms of producing and being passionate and vibrancy and going forward. And Kim is obviously recognized around the world for her efforts and her work. So again, Kim, thank you so much for being here today. And Kim, one more thing I'd like to ask you. I mean, you've written so extensively about leadership and human development that, like, what are those key mental habits that separate people who, merely survive adversity from those who become even, transformational leaders because of it?
Well, the first thing that occurs to me when you ask that question is leaders are learners, first and foremost. They're also, wanting to continually read or listen to podcasts or continue to invest in themselves. And that's what really it is. And it doesn't have to be formal education for sure. But I think the other thing that really distinguishes people more than anything else these days is your willingness to become self-aware. And what I mean is you need feedback from people to become self-aware. So you can't get there by yourself, because we all have blind spots. So for me, number one, and this is in 5 of my books, and it's always going to be in my book, is number one, which is attitude. That's 80% of it for sure. And so just really approaching every situation with a positive attitude makes the biggest difference. We want to be around those people who are positive, and we certainly don't want to be around people who are not.
Right. And I think that, and I'll go back to plugging base in my relationship with Eric and how we are, slowly moving forward based on our both of our individual endeavors, which we believe that we have a powerful potential tool that's new, a template And Eric, I'm excited again to explore more with Kim down the line. And after we have some experimentation and real time results or experience out creating that template. And I want to go back to what I believe is so powerful about the base program is that we're going to create this hyper level of experience that is going to be very difficult to forget when we realize that when we're all together, that competitiveness or trying to learn concepts or share what we've percolated, we come up on our own, the thought like, wow, this could be a solution. This could complement this or that. And there's not a person in any audience that doesn't want at one time or not. There's no reason they're there for a reason, right? As you say, learners, Kim, that everyone in the audience wants at any one given time would love to stand up and say yes, but they don't have the wherewithal to do that. And I think of that base environment, if you put it in and bring that physicality, bring in that community, bring in that small group of people that are like, what this person from different just realms and different situations, and have them experience a moment in time that they could be so powerful that they've never heard a nice word from a person from this supposed stature, or a compliment coming from such a humble person that's been challenged so much, and this person has had their life just on a platter, not much challenge, and to be humbled by that. And I think that's where the power is of our society, that if we can create these experiences, and we know for sure with technology, podcasts are great. It gives us the convenience to learn more and educate ourselves, but there's nothing like going out, breaking bread, being in a room with each other, sharing, smelling each other, feeling you, hearing your laugh, seeing people cry, get emotional. That is what this is all about. And ultimately, right? Imagine fitting in. So Eric, I'd love you to give me your take on what we just both shared.
Well, actually, I'm going to pass the time back over to Kim. I know I've monopolized a lot of it, and I really have enjoyed this time. I know we're running short, so Kim, I'd like to give you a little extra time to close out here today.
Well, I appreciate that. No, I've enjoyed being a guest in talking with you, Greg, as well as Eric. I think that while we work in different genres, if you will, and our artistic expression may be a bit different, we have so much in common. And that's what I think, if I want anything for your audience to hear, is you can come from different parts of the world, working on different things, and still have an opportunity to collaborate, create together.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Right. So I'm going to, so Kim, one thing I keep hearing throughout our conversation is that transformation doesn't happen because life suddenly becomes easier, right? So, it happens because people discover they're stronger than the story they've been telling themselves, right? Whatever, through movement, through mindset, through mentorship, or through serving others. So every one of us has the opportunity to become a warrior of now, and we truly are, we are all for one. And I think that if we keep that completely in mind and understand that this, I love going back to, Eric, the athletics side of that, the competition, the human spirit, and what's not more American than just true good competition and openness and inclusion. So I thank you guys both for our time together. It's been very productive. Thank you so much for the earlier technical issues. We figured those out. Those comes with technology, right? So you guys, again, I will end this as like I always end them. Let's percolate. Kim, I want to thank you so much for your time. I knew you were a truly a game changer, which we will be in touch. Eric and I are, again, riding the wave right now. We've both got books published. I've got an album out. Of course, you have 10. We're going to make sure that your latest and greatest and all of them are available on the link to this episode. And Eric, we got to get that fiction book out, which you surprised me about. So congratulations again, brother. And we will go forward and we will see what the universe as we collide brings us all. So thank you so much for your time, guys. And we'll be talking to you soon. All right, everyone. Till next time, kids. Bye-bye.
Through the tracks, through the soul, combinations of warmth and beauty beyond control. Feel the moment, feel the bliss, watchful seconds, holding more than this. Through the tracks, midnight glows.